we should jump straight in. It's wonderful to have you here with us, and you've invited Dylan along from Q Games. Do you want to introduce yourselves and maybe just sort of say a couple of words about what you'll speak about, and I'll sort of ask a question afterwards and get things rolling.
Sure.
Okay, who goes first? You go first.
I can go first.
Yeah.
It's a quick one. So I'm here. So I run a UK-based studio. We're based in Edinburgh, called KeelWorks, and we've recently released our game Signy All Guns Blazing, which was published by Konami. So hence me dealing with a lot of different kinds of Japanese studios. Yeah, we thought this would be a good opportunity to just have a chat about our experiences with Dylan as well. Dylan, on to you.
Okay, yeah, I'm Dylan Cuthbert. Began in the UK many years ago at Argonaut Software, and then ended up working with Nintendo, making Star Fox and a game for the Game Boy called X, and then went to PlayStation. Did like the PlayStation 2 tech demo with the little rubber ducky, plus made a game based on the Ape Escape characters, and then started my own company in 2001 called Q Games, and we've been running pretty well since then, making a load of games from the Pixel Junk series to a couple of Star Foxes in the franchise for Nintendo, plus a whole bunch of other games for like DSi and stuff like that, and then the Tomorrow Children for PlayStation and Frogger for Konami and all kinds of stuff. So, and also recently we've been dabbling in entertainment systems like for cars as well, like EV. So the Sony Honda Mobility new car that they announced called the Afeela, and we're kind of working with them a little bit as well. So we have our fingers in many pies.
That's really exciting, and a wealth of history for both of you. It's really good to hear. So you yourself are based in Japan now, and Meher's, like I say, up in Scotland, here in the UK.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Q Games is based in Kyoto. It's always been in Kyoto, in Japan. Yeah. Oh, and also I should also add that we founded the Bit Summit.
I was going to remind you about it.
Yeah. We do so many things, I'll forget all of it. In 2013, we created Bit Summit. We actually went to the Tokyo Game Show, and on the way back on the train, we were talking, and we didn't really see any place for our games, especially at that point, our indie kind of pixel junk style of games. We didn't see any place for those at Tokyo Game Show back in 2013. Or 2012, I suppose it was, and then we came back and we created Bit Summit and launched it the following February, and it was a big success from the first time. It was a very small beginning at the first one, but it became big very quickly.
That's fantastic to hear. We are joined by a number of companies today that are on our or part of our delegation to Bit Summit later on this year.
Oh, cool.
So maybe there'll be some questions on that a little bit later on, and hear about some of the differences between Tokyo Game Show and Bit Summit. So yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. I think it'd be really interesting to talk more about those opportunities for sort of UK and Japanese collaboration. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on what kinds of opportunities there are for sort of collaborating between sort of both countries, essentially.
Do you want to go first?
I just want to say, first of all, I don't claim to be an expert on Japan or Japanese culture, so I'm simply sharing my personal experience as a UK-based indie studio, working or having worked with Japanese studios, and in Japan, been there many times. So while I've visited Japan a few times, I mean, Dylan, on the other hand, actually lives there, so so there'll be a kind of interesting take on from different perspectives. He's got a wealth of years of experience over me in terms of being in Japan, living there. So maybe this is different approaches in terms of opportunities. I mean, we can start with the obvious co-development opportunities, or even publishing, distribution support that I've experienced, and IP licensing and all the rest of it. I don't know if I mean, there's localization partnerships as well that could work. Dylan, you wanna?
I mean, obviously the co-development side of things is really good. There's I mean, the UK obviously has a huge amount of talent, especially in the sort of engineering and programming side of things, more than they probably realize, I think, if you compare like programmer to programmer, like equivalent skill set. We've just find that it's much higher, not just the UK, actually, I mean, Europe in general. We find there's just a higher intensity of like programming skill. And that's after, running a company here for like 24, 25 years, seeing a lot of programmers from other countries, not just Japan, but like other countries, and comparing them to like the level of programming skill you get from, say, England and France. It's a completely different level, I think. And that's probably just due to background and like the way the education system works, or something like that. And some difference in the way the systems work that generates these very good kind of intense kind of hardcore engineers. On top of that, I think there's also, I feel recently at least, that there's also a chance of collaboration between the UK creative industry, and I don't mean sort of games as such. I mean the UK like promotional, like trailer creation, video creation, sort of that kind of industry as well, and maybe the Japanese games industry. We've started using or looking into using companies in the UK to generate trailers and things like that, because we find the quality and maybe it comes from that sort of technical background as well, but they tend to go deeper into the game and make better cuts and better edits and make the game look pretty cool. And
I've experienced that as well. We've had a trial on that, and I'm going to add on this in terms of for example, the anime. We had a little anime project we needed to do, and we hired a few people from Europe and one person from America just to have a go at the anime. It just didn't really work. And then we got kind of a mid-range person, artist from Japan, and obviously they nailed it. So that kind
for
of
anime,
thinking, that kinds of get you thinking that in terms of specialized areas, you just find that if you're doing an anime project, collaborate with an anime artist or freelancer or a company in Japan, that will make sense. And as you said, if you're doing trailers, maybe it makes more sense to do it elsewhere in Europe, perhaps. So this was an interesting observation with that experience.
I just find the extra level of like creativity to be pretty good within the sort of UK side.
Yeah, even the music, for example, we have an in-house sound and music composition, so we do our own music. And we realized that, for example, if you're doing an anime-related project, there is a specific kind of music composition that it requires a different kind of skill set, even though you would think it's the basics, it's the same, but it's not. So again, I would prefer not to do it in-house and get somebody from Japan if I have a project in that area. Even for the music. So it's interesting to also see that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Just the different styles, there's like different patterns of creativity, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cultural patterns of creativity.
Yeah. Could be also educational kind of opportunities, maybe just to throw it in there, because we have a very kind of strong, especially here in Scotland, we've got Abertay University that, you have university degrees that actually teach video games, and maybe it's the first in the world, I think, that started it. But having that collaboration with Japanese universities could also be a useful thing to start, exchange programs or mentorship schemes or whatever. I mean, those sort of things.
Yeah, because we've always had an intern program here at Q Games. It's a good way to like get to understand if someone has the talent and the skill required, and then some of those people do stay on and work at Q Games. And we haven't had, it's weird, but we have never had any really reach out so far from like the UK. We tend to have reach out coming to us from there's a place in Holland. And there's a place in France, like a couple of institutes, like they have their gaming courses, and we've had quite a few good people come from those two places. But we haven't really had the UK reach out to us, or any universities in the UK reach out to us yet. So we're interested in hearing from them. definitely. I'm not sure why. It's just but we've just always had it from the two places in Holland. So one place in Holland, one place in France.
Maybe there's a bit more to do in there with the universities.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, a bit more networking to do on that side. Bringing the education system into it.
Yeah, I think there. I mean, these are the main opportunities. Leo, since we were talking about the opportunities, I'm sure there's more, but in general, distribution, publishing, IP licensing, localization, technology, as Dylan mentioned, innovation exchange, and educational part, which there's more to be done there, and code development, of course. So that's in summary, I would put it.
Yeah,
definitely. So thinking sort of in terms of practicalities, then, I mean, how would you sort of put forward how UK studios could maybe work better with Japanese studios? What are the realities of these partnerships that you're sort of
how do you connect them in the first place? I suppose is one big question. I mean, Japan's all about networking. I think probably the UK as well, but it's just find ways to find people in the companies, and then go to as many events as possible and try and speak to them, exchange business cards. Well, in Japan, you still exchange business cards, and just talk a lot and be friendly. And in Japan, I found that the business develops after a little while, so it's not instant, because obviously there's a bit of a cultural barrier as well, and if you can't be too persistent either, so you kind of have to play it cool a little bit with the Japanese companies. For example, we got the project Frogger with Konami through. Well, the way we got that was when we were pitching, one of our own games to them, and we pitched a game and had a kind of a cool look to it. Like, it's on Switch and it looked kind of interesting. The style was like semi-rendered kind of style, and it looked good for a Switch. And we showed it to them, and they said, "Oh no, we're not really funding any independent games," and they just kind of didn't keep just said no to us. But the conversation was very friendly, so very casual and charismatic. So we kind of got on with each other and stuff like that. So then every time I went up to Tokyo, we just popped around to say hello to them. And then after about 6 months or 7 months or so, they sort of reached out to us and said, "Can you take the look that you created for that demo that you made and apply it to our IP, which is we want to kind of bring back Frogger?" And we said sure. So we then basically we created a version of Frogger in a few weeks based on the same system we had here for this demo we had. And showed it to them. They said, "Okay, this is good. Okay, let's do something." And that went ahead. And then Apple Arcade ended up getting involved. And then because it was just starting, and then Apple Arcade ended up having that as like one of the 3 games they showed when they announced Apple Arcade. So it was like a very lucky kind of sequence of events. But as I said, it's like a slow burn, really. And you've just got to. You can't keep pushing for like business. You kind of have to push on other things, like get a connection and like a personal connection to the producer, because he's got to go within the company, like say Konami, and these companies are very they have a very strong hierarchy, I suppose. So he's got to be your champion within that company, and then go and get like the Hanko, which is like the wax seal kind of thing. He has to kind of get that seal of approval from like probably 4 or 5 people, 2 of which he's not really on friendly terms with, on your behalf within the company. And that takes time and trust and courage and all the rest. So that's how you have to play it. And that's how I found it. With the big companies, at least, that's how you have to play it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Trust takes time is my title to put on it. With Konami or with Japanese firms, it's more relationship matters a lot. And from my experience, you really need to play the long-term game in terms of be genuine, be respectful, and you just need to prove yourself or keep doing what you're doing and be persistent but not too pushy so that you can actually build that trust. The credibility goes a long way in Japan, and they value long-term relationships. And for example, with us, with Konami, but working with different, because here we have the Konami Europe, and then they have to report to Japan because everything goes through Japan, right? Everything has to go through Japan. So it takes it even double the time because you have the European team who need to go to the American team, and then the American team and the European team. So you get evaluated with a microscope, and before it goes to Japan, and then you get reevaluated there with another microscope. So it's like takes ages. It took us around 9 months to negotiate the deal with Signy, even though I had 2 other deals on the table which were negotiated in which were presented to me in 4 months. I just decided to continue with Konami. I mean, it paid off at the end, and part of the reason was that there was another thing that happens in Japan, Japanese firms, I guess, is the senior management changes happen every few years, and they happen very abruptly, very randomly, very kind of all of a sudden, kind of in your face, and it could impact on the timelines or your workflow because you just have to wait for the new guy to come and to settle down and to figure out what's going on. And then this is all waiting game. And during our evaluation for Signy the first time, we were about to sign, and then the president went to Japan and didn't come back to the UK. This was the UK president, and then a new president came, and we had to get the reevaluations done based on the new criteria. And that was not fun, and that's why it took longer. But again, we passed that stage too. And then when we released Signy, as soon as the same week of releasing Signy, the president changed again, so the patch got delayed. So these things do happen, and so you need to just build that trust, build that communication. And yeah, I think communication, Dylan, I think that's a good one to jump to, because obviously I would suggest having a translator, definitely, if you have official meetings with you, because language barrier could be a problem. I don't think Dylan has that problem because Dylan speaks fluent Japanese, but I had that problem. So it's important to have somebody who speaks the language to be able to translate.
Yeah, and also that person, even the translator, needs a bit of charisma. So you have to choose your translator well.
Yeah,
so you don't want too dry a translator. Yeah, it can lose a lot if you don't have like someone who's really trying to read the room a bit. So a lot, I mean, yeah, as you're saying, like a lot of things. So it's in the Japanese culture, there's a lot of unspoken context, which comes from the language itself. So, for example, in English, we kind of have to really kind of say everything over and over again. Whereas in Japanese, it's very context based. So you can get away with just saying one word and you get your meaning across. And that's a very different way of thinking. And I think the way languages are constructed really affects how like strategy and like how people think and how they communicate, like across a table, when you're having these meetings. So having a bit of a charismatic translator who can actually read the room. I don't know how you find one, but someone with a bit of experience in that kind of thing, that would help enormously as well. And also, you just have to be down to earth and talk about cool things and show cool things as often as you can.
I mean, No, sorry, go ahead.
Sometimes, like we've talked to we've worked with many Japanese companies like Nintendo, obviously Sony, Bandai Namco, and a few others as well along the way. And the real, I don't know, the way sometimes it works is you get just a little foot in the door. So it might just be like, oh, they need one person to help them out on like some internal game that isn't quite shaping up or needs a bit of extra boost at the end, and so sometimes we'll just take on like a very small project like that, and it gets your foot in the door, and then once you've got your foot in the door, you can slowly widen the door. And that's a pretty good strategy as well, because there's a lot of trust to be built up, mainly because of the language barrier and the cultural barrier, I think.
And it's the way I do business in Europe or in the US, when we are more kind of, you go straight to the point and just dive in and just do the tick tick tick, you know, like here's the what I want and here's what we need and let's not waste time and let's do it. I have to shift that approach in Japan 100%.
No, you can't. Yeah,
You cannot do that at all. So that was an interesting learning curve for me at the very beginning when I was not briefed at all, like we're doing now. There was no sharing, nobody shared experiences. So I had to learn it the hard way, that this is not how things are done in Japan. And obviously now I know, and there's a different energy completely when that shifts automatically and adapts when I'm there.
yeah,
But that comes with also awareness and you know, being aware. But you know, the thing is, when you're a smaller company dealing with such massive bureaucratic, also adding the culture element on it, it kind
yeah,
of you know, when you have limited resources, it doesn't really suit you when this happens. And you would hope,
yeah,
while they always tell you, understand the Japanese culture, try to do this to adapt. I always say that I hope that they could also understand the Western culture and kind of meet me halfway, like, you know, so that if I'm saying
yeah,
something, they wouldn't be offended. And equally, if, you know, if they are trying to not answer my questions directly, I wouldn't be offended because
yeah,
you
yeah.
never get a straightaway yes or a no from them, yeah, which is another
Well, I
frustrating
think,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, I think they do though. So I mean, as you know, gaijin, we actually get away with a lot that maybe
We
Japanese
do, yeah.
people can't get away with. Yeah, yeah. So I think we do get the benefit of the doubt in these meetings. So if you do say something that isn't quite the right polite way to say something, they're more likely to let you off than a Japanese native. So or just the way you're asking about something. No, I mean, just to follow on from the one big difference is you'll probably never ever get a decision made in a meeting. Basically, these meetings are really just to throw things into the air, and if you try and push for a decision, they'll be like they'll squirm. They won't be able to make a decision. So they'll always say "kento shimasu," which is like we'll take it back,
Yeah.
and have a little private discussion about it, you know, with our bosses or whatever. But that's a really initially that is quite different. So it feels like, you know, you're not getting direct responses. But the great thing about these meetings, those kind of meetings with Japanese people, is that they are meticulous note takers. So
Yeah.
and details. It's all about the details. So the more information you can get up into the air in the meeting and just throw it all up there, the more likely something is going to land. And so it's a good. You just have to get used to that process. It's almost like you're not going to get anything immediately out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting also when you're living in Europe, in our case, the UK, most of these big companies that we named earlier, they have European bases, you know, so you will primarily be dealing with Europe, and then the Europe will
Yeah,
take it to Japan. And so you have that extra layer on top of what, for example, in your case, you go direct and deal with Japan. So, you
yeah,
know, if you say 6 months, it's probably 9 to 12 months here. Because
yeah, true.
by the
Yeah,
time
yeah,
the message gets, so, you know, maybe for the UK-based companies, it might be, I mean, it's not as easy as that, but you will always have a UK-based, European-based representation. So you're dealing
yeah,
with another British person who will then go and do the translating for you. That doesn't always work either, because it's also frustrating that you're not in the room always to be able to, you know, give your take directly. It's always being, you know, going through different sources before it reaches the actual main source for decision making. So
yeah,
that's another thing to learn of how to navigate. And it took me a while to have that link with Japan as well, you know, because initially I
yeah.
didn't have that link with Japan. So, but once you do, as
Well,
you said, it's important too.
well, one thing you can try and do from the UK is ask your local, you know, representative if one of you can just tag along, like in the meeting when they report back to the mothership. Yeah, not tag along to Japan, but like, you know, just in the video, in the video chat sort of meeting, just ask if just try and force yourself into that, because you're in the UK side, so you can be a bit more forceful. So you can, you know, you
Sometimes.
can say, you know,
Yeah.
you know, we want to see what happens, or, you know, just try and get into that meeting, because that will help a lot of like the information, like, you know, the misinformation, I suppose. He'll help remove a bit of that, because
Yeah.
it's always hard to rely on like a conduit or a sort of like a sort of an in between, someone in between, who are then reporting about the thing in a different language as well. So it gets really quite.
Plus, you've got the translator there, so you have the different layers of your messages being.
Yeah.
You put in an effort to use your words correctly, nicely, and then the translation might, yeah. Somebody just said here about the business cards in your pocket. I'm just reading the comments here.
Oh yeah.
Mistake once, Nicholas. Yeah, business cards, as Dylan was mentioning earlier, is a big thing. So culture, etiquette, and sensitivity plays a big role. Obviously, with the business cards, you don't just take it and you treat it as a person, right, Dylan? I mean,
yeah. Don't like. I get quite shocked sometimes now, because I've been in Japan so long. When I'll give someone a business card in the UK or in America, and I'll just kind of like look at it and throw it away almost. Like, they don't even look at it. Like, oh yeah, and it's like, oh, that's a bit of a cultural shock after being here so long. So yeah, you got to treat it with respect, and read the title, because you should. It helps you remember the names as well, right? Because you're meeting new people for the first time. So one trick the Japanese use is when you're in a big meeting, you get like 4 or 5 business cards, and how do you remember all these names? And you just place it in order. Yeah, you place it, and everybody does that, and it's a great little thing.
It is. Yeah. So when somebody's sitting in front of you, you put the business card in front of that person.
In front of that person, in order in front of you. So, and that helps a lot.
Was there something else about hierarchy with the business cards, that whoever is the senior, somebody was doing that? I saw it. I'm like, that's the first time I've seen it.
The most senior person should exchange first, I think.
Right.
Other etiquette. There's some other interesting etiquette things. So, for example, if you're visiting a company, you should sit furthest away from the door. So that's another site. So it's an interesting. So the guests are the most honourable, I suppose, in a sense. So they'll sit the furthest away from the door. So if it's an internal meeting, so if you're working at Konami, and then the most important person should be the furthest away from the door. So the furthest away from the meeting room door is like the most important place to be. And so if you walk into a meeting room, so sometimes, it's very hard to understand that before you come over. But if you go into a meeting room and you just sit near the door, when the Japanese come in, they'll get confused. They'll be like, where do we sit? Because then it feels awkward for them to sit in the most important spot, because you're the guest. So it kind of puts them in a pickle, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's new to me, Dylan.
Yeah, so it's a new.
Unless the door is in the middle, then you.
So it's interesting. It's interesting. So, and also at dinners, so like dinner, business dinners and stuff are very important as well. If you go for a dinner with Japanese, producers or whatever, just keep an eye on where people are sitting, and sort of be, just ask them where you should sit, because the order of seating is just a thing here. You have to respect it. So, and
then take into account that you're not just going to bed after the dinner. If it went well, you will go to the after dinner, and then apparently after dinner, and whatever you talk there, you don't share it next day.
There's always like line. And maybe some ramen at the end.
Yes, it's crazy stuff. But it's very interesting, and I just loved it, because we went for dinner once, and I learned that 10 o'clock. I'm like, okay, good night. He's like,
what? And that's where, and that's how you really forge the friendships and the connections. So if you can get, that's where they can let their hair down, and you get to understand what they're really wanting, and people can be a lot more frank. So once you get the initial dinner out of the way, the thing after the dinner is definitely a lot less formal. So it's a lot more, and you get to know each other as people, which is a lot better.
But this whole thing is beautiful if you look at it from a theory book, or if you look at it from the outside. We talk about it. It sounds very nice and interesting, and cultural differences. But also, when you're running a business, I have to admit, especially when you're an indie company, which most of us probably are, you don't have the luxury of, here's a multi-billion-pound company, and they have this hierarchy, and we have to wait.
Yeah.
Patience is a virtue. It's true, but in business, it also could hurt you big time. So you need to have a strategy in place where this whole long time of building that trust and waiting and playing the waiting game to get an answer, if you can, get an answer eventually, then it will destroy you if you just only rely on waiting. So it's also important to
Yeah.
mention that you need to have a strategy and not just rely on, I'm going to just do business with Japan tomorrow. I'm like, no, you're not. You will be
No.
lucky. So it was interesting and frustrating for me to experience that early on, and to figure out that while I am building the relationship, and while I would like to be loyal, because loyalty goes a long way as well in Japan, I believe. And but then loyalty on whose expense, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury to wait. So anyways, that's
They do take some liberties there. I mean, all big companies do. I mean, American companies are the worst.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. I'm just conscious of
Japanese
time.
companies are a little bit better. So the problem with so just to follow on for that,
Yeah.
Japanese companies, once the contract goes through and like it gets done, payments are swift and they're regular, and they come in nicely, right? American companies, you get the contract, that takes the same amount of time, but then the payments are really delayed. Like it's like, 90 day, they just have these weird rules, like Microsoft especially, where the payment comes way too late. But in Japan, the payments are pretty much on time and
I
prompt.
have to agree. I
And
had a problem with that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's so once it kicks off, you're fine. Once the contract is done, it's fine. But and there's no more delays. The delays are gone after that point. So that's a good side.
Yeah.
Nintendo, Konami, Sony, Bandai Namco, all the main ones that we've worked with have all been very good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
really fascinating stuff,
Leo, you're
really
pointing out the time. We can talk about this for hours more.
Yeah.
I think what would be interesting is obviously, you mentioned at the start, Dylan, about Bit Summit. I think, maybe just a few minutes on sort of how you can expect to apply some of these sort of etiquette matters to a show like Bit Summit. It's all very well sort of talking about sort of private meeting rooms, but what can our guests sort of how should our guests be behaving at Bit Summit perhaps differently compared to Gamescom or something?
Yeah, Bit Summit's a lot more casual, a lot more international. So you're in amongst a whole bunch of other foreigners as well. And there are a whole bunch of Japanese people there as well. I think the main thing really, I think, the etiquette thing is really the business card thing. So have business cards. Because, I mean, there'll be several parties or get-togethers and things like that. And it's a great way to break the ice. You can just say, can we exchange business cards, and they'll be obliged to share a business card, whoever it is. And there might be someone important at Microsoft Japan, or then it might just be a programmer from Q Games, who knows? But it's like you'll get to meet them and know their name, and you'll get a nice little collection of business cards. The etiquette for like the seating and stuff like that isn't as important during Bit Summit, unless you're actually going to go to one of these companies. Like if you had like a meeting at Nintendo, because it's only down the road. Remember, Nintendo's based in Kyoto. Like if you did have some sort of meeting arranged at Nintendo, then you have to be a little bit careful, So yeah. But at Bit Summit itself, you'll enjoy yourself. It's very much a very international vibe, and everybody's very friendly, and they'll introduce you. Like you just ask anybody, whatever you're trying to look for, like or who you want to meet, or what kind of companies you want to meet. And if you talk to people, they'll introduce you. They'll try and introduce you to them. And if you have a business day pass for the Friday, which I think the delegation probably does have, sign up for the meet to match system for doing meetings, because that's a very good system. And we have like an area underneath Bit Summit where you can meet. You have tables assigned and everything, and you can meet people very easily. And it's really well used, and lots of deals are done during Bit Summit down in that meeting area.
Oh, that's really, really good to hear. Really
sign up as soon as you
also
can.
good for GTC and Gamescom as well. It was very useful to have. One thing I would add, I know the time is almost over. One thing I would add on top of all of this that we mentioned today is that having one person from the company whose job is to deal with the liaison, with the relationship building is key. Obviously, you cannot build that trust and that relationship if you don't have, because most of the indie studios usually start with, you know, a group of programmer friends come together and form a company, or artists or whatever, but usually, because that's naturally how it evolves into a company, but they forget sometimes that they're running a business. So when you have that business person or whoever is in charge of the liaison, let that be a dedicated person to consistently doing this. It is a full-time job, trust me. So I think that's sometimes something that indie studios do miss. Okay.
Or one extra thing for BitSummit as well, to be a little bit cautious about, because it's very international. You might fall into the trap of only speaking with Westerners or English-speaking people. I would really try hard to like go out of your way to just try and communicate with Japanese people while you're there, because there are a lot of people from a lot of Japanese companies there, and because it's so international, it can be a bit easy to just fall into that kind of expat kind of circle at the place. But you'll enjoy yourself and probably just get a lot more, a much richer set of contacts if you just go a bit deeper, and even if you can't, even if they can't speak English that well, and you can't speak, obviously probably can't speak Japanese, you'll still communicate. You'll still find a way to communicate, and it's worth the challenge. It's worth the effort.
Solid advice, Dylan. Thank you so much, Meho and Dylan. It's been really, really fantastic having you have a little chat on this subject, and I hope our audience will have learned a great deal. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm sure there might be some sort of questions in the chat afterwards. So if you're happy to sort of stick around and maybe answer some of those, that would be really, really fantastic. Meg, can I invite you to the stage? Are you able to unmute?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. I will try to do my presentation thing. It didn't work last time, so hopefully it is going to work this time. We'll share the screen. Can you see my screen here?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think probably Dylan knows everything I'm going to talk about today already, because he's running a BitSummit. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about indie game developers in Japan, who they are, and what we can probably learn from them a little bit, how they are being discovered in Japan. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. Just a very brief history of indie game developers in Japan. They have been around for a long time. It's since 1980s even. There's this big community in Japan called Comic Game Market. We call it Comic-e, where doujin people, where doujin's basically the people who share the same kind of interest, who kind of sell their comic books or something like that at the comic market and share their interests together. That culture has been around for a very long time in Japan. As you know, Japan is big on comic and novels, and as well as the animation. So they all share that interest, and the same goes for games. So the first one, I think, the most famous one that came out of doujin market for games is Toho Project from Team Shanghai Alice. And they're still going very strong, publishing games, but they first started in 1998. After that came more like a free game kind of people. The most famous one around that time was Elona by Noah. And they have been again, the game has been distributed very widely, very popular among this doujin culture, doujin, I would say doujin people. And they've been also going strong. The second game is coming. They just did the crowdfunding for this game, for the second game called Elin. And it is, I think they're launching in 2026. I think the most successful one, or the most well-known one from this doujin clan is Sakuna Rise and Ruin, that came out in 2020 from Edelweiss. Again, it's just by 2 people. The main people are 2 people. One programmer, I think one other one is more like animation person, graphic person. Anyway, the first test version was introduced at the comic market in 2015, and it was published in 2020, and has gone really big in globally. It was, I think, published by Marvelous Game. And I think they actually got connected at Bit Summit, as far as I know. So, that is one of probably the biggest title that came out of this Dojin market. Then there's a different kind of indie game. It's more like Western game, indie game people. The most well-known one among them just goes directly to the self-publishing and become big in Japan. Most well-known one is called Chilla's Art. It's run by 2 brothers. It used to be. Now they have 3 brothers running it. They do lots of Japanese horror game, maybe 2 or 3 games a year. They collaborate a lot with influencers, and influencers love them because they are very usually around 10 hours or so. It's relatively cheap game, but it's very good for the influencer, especially for the video content. So they're very popular among them. And I think the most famous one, I think, coming out of this straight to Steam self-published title recently is the Ace Exit, created by Kotake Create. That came out in 2023. It's now becoming a movie next year, coming out next year, I think. So those are the indie games developer coming out of Japan. And also another one who is probably the most famous among of all that is Pocket Pair. They were established in 2015. First game in 2019 called Over Dungeon, and then Craft of Fear, and of course Power Worlds that came out in 2024. And they are still considered big indies in Japan. All of this, I think, were supported by the event, such as Bit Summit that started in 2013, and TGS in the indie game area in the TGS 2013. They are all started to build up from that time on. So the next is, what are the driving forces of indie game development? I think, and it's relatively new when you think about it, because we're all talking about 2010, 2013. It's only about 15 years max when it comes to talking about indie games. They did exist as a doujin games, but not really as indie games in Japan. And I think the driving force is really the growing number of PC game players. Now we have about 26, this is the data from CESA in 2024, but PC game players now at 26%. It's a sizable market, so it's a viable market just to publish game on Steam right now. Also, there's a lot of support from the indie games from the console platform. I think Nintendo especially has been very good at supporting them in Japan. The market is also very big over there, so that has also contributed. And also lots of opportunity and support by indie publishers. When I say by Prism, Phoenix, Marvelous, Bandai Namco Studio, or these Japanese publishers based in Japan, I think especially when it comes to support, I'm not just talking about them publishing the game, but also doing event sponsorship and a lot of other things that they can enhance the market side of the indie games. Another, I think, interesting thing I think about is that might have contributed is less stigma to work on a second job. Most of these indie game developers are basically having their main job, and game development is your second job. And until 2018, the Japanese company rule, they always, under the law, they always could have second job. But under the company rule, there was a little clause saying it is recommended not to have a second job. And that has been struck out in 2018. And it makes much more easier for people to say, well, I have a second job. And I think that has also eased some people to start getting into this, and also telling people that they have a second job as a game developer. I think the third thing is, and another thing is launch of new content and incubation program that has started. I'm going to touch this a little bit in the next slide. But there's lots of government support, associations, and stuff, and lots of contests that have started, especially in the last 2 to 5 years. And finally, I think this is a big one, which is the content creators and streamers who are constantly looking for something new and unique. It's a very competitive market out there in Japan as well for the content creators and streamer. So for them, it's very important to look for something. So Chilla's art, for example, has been very, very successful because of the content creators and streamers. And I think it's the same thing for the 8th Exit. It's been the content creators' favorite in Japan. The kind of contest and mentoring program that came out in Japan, they were relatively new, as I said. They started probably in the last 5 years or so. But there's a mentoring program called Indie Game Incubator, which is supported by Marvelous publisher. SOFU, which is sort of like a hybrid indie game incubator and Ministry of Economy and Trade and Industry that came together and created this mentoring program. And also CESA, and Ministry of Culture, started the Top Game Creator Academy. It's either they support them, there's no, they support them on financially, mentoring. They support them for event attendance, but they don't look for anything in return. So it's just pure support to the indie game developers. Also, there are media publishers, the traditional one, who has been publishing comic books, novels, and magazine in Japan, who are getting into game industries, and they become a big supporter of indie games in Japan. One is called Kodansha Creators Love, where they actually support up to, I think, 10 million yen per year for one contest winners. So that have started, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago. And there's also a game creators camp where they assemble lots of different talents in one area and they create the game together. They recently launched a website called Game Pitch Base Camp, where they are connecting publisher to the independent indies. And it's in beta right now, but they just started as a kind of scheme as well. So that's something that they have been supporting. That is a kind of new support that's available for from the media publishers. And also there's a contest again for GA Studio, which is Bandai Namco Studio and Phoenix publishers, new contest that started last year. And also Konami has, this is just for the student, but there are indie game contests for Konami. So lots of support started to emerge for the indie game developers in Japan. And also, I think it's been touched a little bit by Dylan earlier, but there's a lot of indie game event happening in Japan. Of course, there's a big one called Digigame Expo in Tokyo, Beat Summit Kyoto, and Tokyo Game Show, indie games area. I think Beat Summit and Tokyo Game Shows is more toward the international market. That's how the Japanese indie game people see it anyway. But there are lots of very domestic events as well, and these are listed there here as well. As you can see, it's spread all over Japan. And I think the reason why they are doing that is because a lot of these indie game developers are having this as a second job, and they don't necessarily have money to travel to Tokyo all the time. So it's very good to have a local event everywhere. Also, attendance fee is relatively cheap. It's usually some of those smaller events can be like, if you can have a little table for like under £50, even less. So it's very easy to go and exhibit in those events. There's also one online event called Indie Live Expo. They have an Indie Wave area where people can actually submit their indie game trailers, and they show it. They do the showcase there as well. So there's lots of indie game events happening in Japan, and as relationship is very important in Japan, it's very good to attend a lot of them. And publishers, small and large, they are going there. They meet with people, so it's not like yeah, so it would be a good place to actually meet with them in Japan as well. So some takeaway from my short presentation here. So Japanese players' dynamics are changing. A lot of PC games are, there's more market for PC games. Also, there's a big console market. Nintendo, as I said, is a big part of that. It has been, they shift most unit in Japan, so it's very important for people to actually look into maybe first with Steam, and then if they're successful, and as I see it, a lot of indie games are doing that. It's first launched on Steam. If they're successful, they find a publisher, or they self-publish on Nintendo platform and then onto other platforms as well. The game industry is now considered a vital growth sector in Japan, and so there's a lot of government support that's starting to happen and to take place, as you can see with SOFU and other incubation program that is starting to come out. And there are many opportunities for indie game developers to present their games as an event or contest. Most of these contests and incubation or mentoring programs, these opportunities are available for everyone. There are some restriction on age sometimes, and sometimes the restrictions say you have to live in Japan in order to apply. But they don't restrict on nationality or language. So you are able to also apply if you are interested in making big in Japan first. And you are able to live there. Also, we are starting to see some very exciting Japanese indie titles. They tend to be smaller titles, but once in a while we see some big title like Palworld coming out of Japan. So I think it will be interesting to watch this space. And also, because I am doing marketing and influencer marketing and PR, this is just my experience working in Japan as a marketer. One is that when marketing games, PR, X, Twitter, and content creator streams are very effective in Japan. We have tried other platforms. None of them really works so far for us. So we usually concentrate on these three things. And successful coverage by the content creators stream can really determine the success of the game. And another interesting things about this is that I was having a chat with some publisher in Japan and said, well, whenever I contact the content creator, they don't actually, they always ask me for money. And I said, oh, that's interesting because they never asked me about money. I always, most of them, well, I wouldn't say never. I have paid for some of them, but they don't usually, the content creators that I have worked with have not asked for money. And I thought that was very interesting. I think and that might very well be that because I am contacted from foreign country, I am getting away, as Dylan said earlier, that there are ways to get away if you contact some people if you're a foreign company. So that might be one reason why. Another reason I think is because I have some relationship with people, started probably 10 years ago, and I have been going back to them many times. So some kind of relationship, if you build one, you are able to get away with not paying them. So that's another, I think, interesting aspect of working with a content creators in Japan. And finally, this is a very unique Japanese thing, I think, but successful games with unique IP can cross over to different medium very quickly in Japan. So for example, Sakuna of Rise and Ruin, that is now a TV animation in Japan. And they just finished season 1. They signed up for season 2, so it's coming out soon. Another one is The Exit 8. Again, that has become the movie that's coming out next year. So there's lots of those crossover to other medium happening in Japan. If one IP is successful, they tend to do that. So that's another interesting aspect of, I think, Japanese culture in a way that, and I think that's probably the reason why the media publisher like Shueisha and Kodansha are interested in getting into the game space, because they are the one who has lots of other aspects of medium within their organization. So those are, so yeah, that's it from me on the presentation.
Well, thank you, Meg. I think that was really, really interesting. A phenomenal sort of overview of the indie landscape. I mean, I suppose as well, you know, I guess it goes without saying that the rise of indie games in Japan suggests, you know, there's an appetite there for consuming them, regardless of whether they're from, you know, Japan itself or non-domestic. I mean, does that sort of is there an inclination for those content creators, for those influencers, to sort of seek out games that are not necessarily domestic games, would you say, or is the vast majority of everything sort of more Japanese orientated?
I think that's an interesting question. I think most of these game companies, no, the content creators, not necessarily. Especially, so I worked in one game that had a very successful mobile game that transferred into the PC games in the past. And because the title was already well known as an IP, when I went to them and say, are you interested in doing this, but it's in PC, they'll immediately say, yes, I would be interested in it. So it's whether that title is well known or not. Also, I tend to go work with those influencers who really focus on indie games. So, and they are always looking for something. So if I can find very interesting things to promote, something very unique that they haven't seen before, I just say, would you like to do that? This game does this and this. It's not translating to Japanese, but I can help you through. They usually say, yes, I'll be interested in it. So yeah. It's not necessarily very Japanese, and most of the games, in fact, has been very Western. So it's not. It doesn't look Japanese. Yeah. Another interesting thing about Japanese, I think, is like they are very good with moddings. So they also transfer the game into their taste very often. So I represent this one company where they have a very Western kind of face with the characters. And immediately the game's out, they came up with a mod that changed into the Japanese anime type of face. And that kind of thing happens a lot in Japan. And then the modder likes to, once that mod is out, some influencers have been using that mod to play it, so that it's much more, I think it's more appealing to their fans, I think.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. It's I find the sort of modding side of things often sort of increases the longevity of a game, and I suppose exploits different angles that perhaps developers haven't really sort of thought about covering themselves. So that's interesting. I think there's been a question in the chat here about sort of whether indie games are more likely to be successful on Steam, or is it actually sort of critical that they are on Switch or PlayStation? I mean, what would your comment be on that?
I think because those indie developers tend to be small, unless they find the publishers, I think they just go on Steam and publish and see what happens. I think it's the same thing that we do over here as well. Once they are successful, or if they are being picked up by the publisher, I think they tend to actually go on to publish on other consoles. I think that one of the reasons why they are doing that is the rating system is very hard to say. It's very costly as well. So for those people who are just doing it at one or two person doing it on a side job, it's very hard to get through that. So whereas I think with Steam, it's a little bit more, it's much more easier to actually get into. So I think that might be the reason why.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
No, that's fair enough. Sorry, my alarm went off just then. Yes, okay. Well, thank you so much, Meg. It's been really, really fascinating having you here to chat with us. Obviously, please feel free to stick around, and you put your details on the screen and everything for people to get in touch. Manu, are we ready for you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. let me
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Meg. Sincerely appreciate it. And yeah, delighted to welcome Manu here from Newzoo. I guess to talk about the market in Japan and see what the latest trends are with everything going on there. That'd be fantastic. I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself, Manu.
Yeah, awesome. So hello everybody. I'm Manu, and I'm the director of market intelligence at Newzoo. So today I'm gonna present a snapshot of the Japanese gaming market, powered by the data from our platform. So there will be a lot of insights, a lot of numbers. I will try not to go too fast. I think I have time, and otherwise it will be available after this meeting. But before we start, I'd like to give some background about my journey with Japan and games. And for that, I have 3 pictures to show you. So the first one is a character named Goldorak in French, which is Grandizer, I believe, in the UK. So as a French-speaking Belgian kid, my first exposure to basically Japanese culture came very early. So this TV show was aired between 1975 and 1977 in Japan, and then it quickly was aired in France in 1978. And this presentation is mostly for a UK audience, but I think it's worth noting that French and Belgian kids, they were really among the first in Europe to be exposed to the Japanese pop culture. It's no coincidence that France is now one of Nintendo's biggest markets, and also France is the 2nd largest manga market in the world. So that's just to set the scene. The second one is Street Fighter 2, 1991. I'd been playing games for a while, and Street Fighter 2 was really a milestone. First, I played in arcade, and then on the Super Nintendo, and the Super Nintendo was my first gaming console, actually. And for a long time, it was just the only game I was playing on that console. And then fast forward a few decades later, we're in 2019. I was working at Electronic Arts. I started my career in video games there in 2015. And I was in charge of the first forecast of Apex Legends. As you can imagine, my forecast was not as good as the reality. So it was really a great surprise success. And I was really lucky to be part of that journey. And the reason I mentioned Apex Legends, and I will talk further about Apex Legends later, is it's just an incredible success in Japan. Unexpected and also incredible. So that's enough about me. Now let's have a moment to look at the product that Newzoo, that I've used from Newzoo for this presentation. And we have a few products that cover different areas of the business. So first of all, when it comes to games data, we are using our game performance monitor, and that's how we've tracked title level metrics like playtime, like lifetime players and digital revenue across PC and console. After that, we also have a gamer research product where mostly these tools, they enable us to have a deeper understanding of the player behavior and motivations that I will share later. We have a market intelligence team in charge of the report and forecast. So we are able to do market sizing and forecasting of many countries, including Japan. So you will also have a look at that one. For your information, and I think it's a good leeway after the discussion about the indie games and the discoverability, we also have a toolkit called Business and Story Intelligence that's really focusing on digital storefront visibility, discoverability, and also allowing to track marketing attribution. And then finally, we also have a specific consulting and custom research team. But now let's start. So what do we expect today? What can you expect today? We will talk about the markets, the players, and then the games. So for the markets, we're going to use the market report and forecast tool. And to set the stage, let's look at a few key figures. So Japan is the 3rd largest video game market globally, accounting for 9.1% of global games revenue, while representing just 2.2% of the global players. So that makes really each Japanese player significantly more valuable on average. On console, it's the 2nd biggest market and contributes to 8% of the global revenue and 6.2% of the global player base. On mobile is ranked number 3. It delivers a striking 11.5% of the global revenue with only 2% of the player. So you really see the value of the Japanese players. And then on PC, it's the I mean, I was personally surprised by that, and it has been a great evolution. It's the number 4 country in the world on PC, behind the US, China, and South Korea. It contributes to 4.1% of the global revenue and 2.9% of the players. So you cannot avoid Japan as a gaming market whenever you are thinking about it. Now let's how does that compare to UK? So let's start with the most striking insight. So on average, a Japanese player generates significantly more revenue than the UK player at $223 compared to $145. On mobile, it's even more impressive, where you can see it's almost triple. So the value of the average revenue per player in Japan compared to the UK. On PC, it's slightly, Japan has slightly the edge in revenue and player share, and a slight lead in revenue per player, but it's a bit more closer. And then on console, the story is slightly different. Japan leads in revenue share, but UK players, they spend more per capita. So it's quite interesting to see the comparison between the three platforms. So let's look at the platform breakdown for Japan in 2024. So we are looking now in local currency, and I will explain quickly why it really matters when it comes to Japan. So the total market reached 2.483 billion yen in 2024. It was up 4.3% versus the prior year, and a performance slightly better than the global market. Mobile remains the dominant force, accounting for 69% of total revenue. It grew 5.2% year on year, slightly below the average of global. Obviously, the big story that was last year and also in previous year is PC, which posted an increase of 16.2% year on year. That's nearly 4 times more growth than the total market. And now PC represents 10% of the total Japanese games market and half of the console market. And on the other hand, the console revenue declined by 3.1% and was mostly driven by the Switch reaching a late life cycle phase, and also a weaker premium slate in 2024. And that was slightly steeper than the global console market because of the importance of the Switch in Japan. So overall, it was a very strong year in local currency, and particularly for PC. The story is slightly different when you look in USD. You can see that due to the weakening Japanese yen, as a foreign investor, the situation is quite different. Still, PC was still up, plus 7.8% year on year, but the other segment and the total was down. So yeah, Japan is a healthy market in terms of growth, but a little bit less when you look at it from a USD perspective. So this chart shows the long-term evolution of PC and console software revenue in Japan, also in local currency. So what you can see in here is that between 2015 and 2018, the market was relatively flat. And starting in 2018, the PC gaming entered a period of strong, sustained growth. It's been super impressive. So what was one of the triggers in 2018? In July 2018, the professional esports players, they were granted an exception from the country's strict gambling prohibition. The prize money awarded to esports players can now legally be treated as wages and not as gambling. And that really unlocked a new audience for the PC. And you can see what happened afterwards. From 2018 to 2021, the PC revenue grew at 12% CAGR, more than double the pace of console. And then there was obviously, like everywhere else, the COVID impact around 2020 and 2021. But on PC, really, the momentum accelerated further from 21 to 24, and PC revenue grew by 21.4% CAGR in these 3 years. While, as you can see, console was rather being stagnant, again, due to the life cycle of the Switch, and also probably some pull forward revenue due to the COVID. In 2024 alone, you can see that that PC revenue surpassed 240 billion yen, which is now almost half of the console business. If we look ahead for 2025 to 2027, we still see a growth for the PC business, but at a lower level, rather closer to 5.1%. And console are expected to accelerate slightly to 6.3%, and that's mostly thanks to the launch of the Switch 2. So all in all, the key takeaway here is that the PC gaming has been the main growth engine for Japan, at least on PC and console, for the past 7 years. And while the growth will slow, PC market is now really part of the picture in Japan, and there are many opportunities over there. And just for your information, the picture is again slightly different in USD. It's a much more stable market, which is a bit unfortunate, but in reality, when you are in the country, it was very good for the local publishers at least. Finally, for this section, let's have a look at the console install base. So as of December 2024, there is about 50 million modern era console, let's call it that way, that have been sold in Japan. So when we are talking about modern era console, we are talking about the Switch, we are talking about the PlayStation 4 and 5, we are talking about the Xbox One and the Xbox Series X and S. Nintendo is by far ahead of everything else with almost 70% of the units sold. PlayStation follows at 29%. And then Xbox is still a niche platform at 1% or 760,000 units. What is important to note is that, yes, Nintendo here is very impressive, but let's not forget that the Switch also replaced both the Nintendo living room console and also the portable console. While for PlayStation or Xbox, they really remain focused on the living room hardware. So that's also something that always needs to be considered when we are benchmarking the Nintendo install base with the PlayStation. So a few key takeaways for this section. The Japanese players are highly valuable. They generate 9.1% of global game revenue, despite making up just 2.2% of the global player base. The recent revenue growth has been strong, but the weakening Japanese yen against the US dollar is a headwind for international publishers. PC revenue in Japan has grown rapidly over the past 7 years, but the pace is expected to slow down. Nintendo dominates the domestic console market, accounting for 70% of hardware sales. And finally, excluding mobile and Nintendo platform, the Japanese PC and console market still represent a solid 2.5 to 3 billion opportunity. So the reason I wanted to show this number is that we acknowledge that not everybody is able to be on the Switch or on the Switch 2. So while Switch 2 is going to be more open to third-party publisher, it's still a different story than just a release on Xbox and on PlayStation. So that was for the market. Now we're going to talk about the players. And for this section, we're going to use our global gamer study. In terms of player demographic, let's start with the PC and console penetration. So Japan has a lower share of PC and console players among total players at 60%, lower than 66% in the US and 71% in the key European market. So it's the European flag here, but you can see it's the main European markets, not all of them. But I think it really shows that mobile remains more dominant in Japan, while PC and console is more broadly adopted in the West. When we look at the social media and the chat app that is being used by the players in Japan, YouTube is on top in Japan, followed by Line and then by X, while in the United States, it's still about Facebook, and in Europe, it's now WhatsApp. But the difference are very small in Europe between WhatsApp, YouTube, and also Instagram. But I think that's the kind of thing very important when you are trying to reach your players to really understand where they are and where they are spending their time when they are not playing. Purely on a demographic standpoint, looking at, first of all, the gender, well, there's actually not that much to say. And it's PC and console, it's excluding mobile, just to be clear in this slide. It's around 60% of male, around 40% of female, and around 1% on non-binary. There's really nothing really specific for Japan compared to the United States or the key markets in Europe. What is more interesting is when we start looking at the average age. The average age in Japan of the PC and console player is at 34.7, significantly higher than the United States and also a bit higher than Europe. If you look at the age band, Japan has fewer players aged 21 to 35 and also fewer players at between 10 and 20, but there's more player in the 36 to 65 age range. Half of the players have more than 35-year-old in Japan. And I think that's just it's in line with the average population in this country. And I also would like to highlight that it's probably where the United States and Europe are going to go in the future. So I think it's very important to acknowledge the fact that there is a significant older audience in Japan that can be reached, but with the right games and also with the right communication. Now, let's look at the reasons to play and the most appealing features of games. So we are again comparing Japan with the United States and with Europe. The first thing I want to highlight is that the Japanese players, they really enjoy a deep, interesting story. They want open storytelling. It's the same in Europe and the United States, but as you can see, it's not as highly ranked in Japan, where it's really the top reason to play games, the top feature that they want in a game. Secondly, Japanese players, they enjoy vast open world or universe to explore, but not as much as in the United States and in Europe, where it's really critical that it has to be there to be successful in these territories. And finally, for Japan, and really that's standing out compared to the other regions we are looking at, Japanese players, they play when there is progression by puzzle solving, when there is planning, tactics, and strategy, when there is an interesting design, and also when there are activities like harvesting, collecting, or looting. In the US specifically, they enjoy playing against each other more than in other regions. And then there are a lot of similarities between the United States and Europe when it comes to high-speed gameplay, lots of optional tasks, high-quality graphic, and puzzle-solving aspect. I think what's interesting is that Japanese players, they don't that much value high-quality graphics, but they want an interesting design. That's probably the difference between the two. They want something visually impactful, but not through technology, but rather through design. Yeah. Looking at the game persona distribution, there is a relative difference between also Japan. In this case, it's Europe has been replaced by the UK. And you can see that for Japan, the top profiles are story-first players and solo adventurers. I mean, it confirms what we've seen on the previous slide, but I think it's always interesting when two different sources of data give you the same outcome, the same trend. In the UK and in the US, which are two markets that are relatively close, culturally relatively close, it's more about competition lovers, planners and tacticians, style-conscious party players. So there is a greater appetite for social, competitive, and team-based gameplay. And finally, in Japan, there's also a high share of builders, farmers, nurturers, Second Life escapists, and also puzzler and personal besters. So all in all, Japanese players, they lean heavily towards more solo and story-driven play, while the Western players, especially in the US, are more engaged with strategic and competitive elements. So here are the key takeaways from this section. Japan PC and console player base is older than in the West, but the gender distribution is very similar. The PC console penetration is slightly higher in the US and in Europe. Storytelling matters globally, but preference differs. So the Japanese player, they really value their narrative depth and design, while Western players favor open world and high quality graphics. And Japanese players are more likely to play solo, while US and UK players enjoy playing with or against other players. And now let's take a look at the games. And for that, we're going to use our game performance monitor and our global gamer study. First of all, let's look on PC. What are the genre preferred genre played by players, and also the favorite themes. And here you can see, so you have Japan in dark teal, and then UK in light teal. So first of all, Japanese console player, they love their role-playing game, ideally in a fantasy or in sci-fi setting. While the UK players, they have broader mix of genres. As you can see, they enjoy shooters, they enjoy adventure, they enjoy sport, they enjoy sandbox. They also enjoy simulation, and you can see almost all the other bars are higher in the UK. And I think what's also remarkable is that there is sport is barely visible in Japan compared to the UK. And the UK, it's probably football in that case. And then when it comes to favorite themes, I think a few themes are standing out with Japan. So survival is more popular in UK, mystery slightly, and also post-apocalyptic is significantly most popular in the UK compared to Japan. Looking on PC, and what's interesting is that there are some difference between console and PC, and there are also some difference between the countries. So first of all, the three first, shooters, adventure, and role-playing, they have a similar weight. They are the top three for both countries. So the PC players in Japan have a more similar interest to the UK players, while in console we see there is a higher difference between the players of the two countries. What's interesting in Japan to see that Battle Arena and Battle Royale are much more popular on PC compared to the UK. So there are these League of Legends and Dota 2 players in Japan that maybe you don't find so much in the UK. UK, it's more about simulation and strategy. And again, survival and post-apocalyptic are the ones that stand out for the UK as a difference to Japan when it comes to favorite themes. On mobile, simulation and role-playing are top in Japan. So when we are talking about simulation, we are not talking about racing. We are not talking about sport. We are talking about mostly character collection simulation. So we are talking about the Pokemon, that kind of game, which I consider simulation, as you are basically managing the life of creatures. That's why it's so popular in Japan, and it's not really a surprise. And other than that, I would say the only thing that I would show again is the interest for survival and post-apocalyptic theme in the UK as opposed to Japan. But I think the biggest standout is really simulation and role-playing, while the UK players, they prefer adventure, shooters, and sports on mobile phone. When we look at the top console franchises, so here it's the top franchise being played in the last 6 months by console players. So no surprise, Nintendo is there, Super Mario, Pokemon, Splatoon. Then you have the other Japanese IPs, Monster Hunter, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, Gran Turismo. And then on console, outside of Japanese IPs, you have Minecraft, Fortnite, and Apex Legends. If you look at PC, obviously you have to remove the Nintendo franchises, and then you end up with the same Western world franchises with Minecraft, Fortnite, and Apex. Then on top of that, League of Legends, as I explained just previously, there is this Battle Arena players, also some Star Wars games, and Grand Theft Auto. And when it comes to the Japanese IPs, the one you can find here is a game which is called Uma Musume Pretty Derby. So you might not have heard about that game, but it's a very popular game over there. It's one of the best transmedia concept ever. And it's basically, it's a gacha-based training sim where you raise horse girls, participate in race, manage their schedule, and perform live show. So it's very Japanese. Right now it's available on mobile. It's available on Steam Japan. But in 2 days, in 1 day, they are releasing it. They are releasing a global version on Steam also. So it will be curious to see how this IP can be exported basically to players across the world. But yeah, that's kind of the specificities. I had never heard about that game before, but it was interesting. It's interesting to see that it's making up the top 4. And it's also very highly ranked on mobile, obviously. Now let's have a look at the rankings. On this slide, we are looking at the top 10 on console on the left and on PC on the right. It's by lifetime players, and it's PC and console excluding Switch, and it's for releases since 2022. So we wanted to have a look and see what has been very successful in recent years in Japan. The first call out, which is very impressive, is the number of Japanese titles on console that make up the top 10. So eight games out of 10. So yeah, that's very obvious. The Japanese players on console really enjoy their local IPs. In the column, which is called percentage of 37 market, is basically the share of the Japanese player out of the 37 markets that we are covering in our tool. And that gives an idea how much it over-indexes for these games compared to the average of Japan. Average of Japan is around 3% of the 37 markets. But you can see the Japanese games, they are over-indexed a lot in Japan. So that's super impressive to see that. And then the two other games, Hogwarts Legacy, very popular also thanks to the popularity of Harry Potter in Japan. And then one that I had to check the data, I was a bit surprised, it's Ark Survival Ascended. One of our assumptions for that is it's also some kind of creature simulation management with dinosaurs, and that could be appealing to the Japanese audience. And yeah, because it's console, Palworld is not there because Palworld is not on PlayStation. It's only on Xbox, and Xbox being so small there, you will not find it in the top. When you look at the PC title, you see, first of all, the proportion of the 37 market is very similar across the board. So there are not games that are really standing out compared to the average of Japan. I think so. What you see here is a trend that you see globally. The only difference is that slightly shuffling of the titles. So the games that are kind of the trendy co-op games are very successful in Japan. As you can see, Lethal Company, Repo, Content Warning, and Helldivers 2. And then on the other side, if you compare other, like the AAA games, like Baldur's Gate 3, and also kind of Helldivers 2, even if it's a lower price, they ranked lower compared to the rest of the world. So one of our assumptions here is that the Japanese player enjoy to play on PC, co-op focused game, but potentially not the AAA premium games at $60 or $70, or not as much. For example, you also don't see Monster Hunter Wilds being there. Monster Hunter Wilds is played on console and not on PC. Now, if we do the same analysis, but we look at free-to-play games, but here we look at all-time releases. And the first thing we can notice is that there are only 2 Japanese games in the top 10 on console, and there are none on PC. So the 2 Japanese games are Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis, and then Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operation 2. And they over-index a lot also in Japan. Other than that, a very strong performance from Apex Legends. Apex Legends is the #1 free-to-play title on PC and console in Japan. That's kind of a very impressive on console, and on PC is #4. And also a very strong performance from Genshin Impact, as you can see. And Dota 2 is up there. So what have we learned in this section? The Japanese player, they prefer mostly single-player RPGs on console and shooters on PC, while the UK prefer shooters across both platforms. Sport is not a significant genre in Japan. Japan much prefer fantasy and science fiction themes. Japanese players gravitate toward domestic franchises, especially the Nintendo ones. The Japanese publisher dominate the console premium game market, while Japanese players choose lower-priced, trendy PC co-op experiences. And then Apex Legends and Genshin Impact remain massive free-to-play successes. And finally, to close the loop, last slide about Apex Legends. So as I say, one of the most successful Western developed games in Japan, and a great example of what happens when an outstanding game is combined with the right local marketing and cultural alignment. So why did it work so well in Japan? First of all, it's about the characters. While they are not really anime characters, they look clean and stylish with distinct personalities and hero abilities. And that's really, they feel inspired by Japanese pop culture. And for example, Valkyrie here, who is part Japanese, really made that connection even stronger. And she has also a look of Neon Genesis Evangelion. This is kind of a mecha style that really resonates super well for the audience. Then the gameplay, it's a fast, skill-based and team-oriented game, which is aligned with local preferences that you see in games like Monster Hunter, for example. The streamers had a huge impact. So the top streamers, they drove visibility. And the fact that Apex has really a dynamic gameplay, it made it really ideal for streamers. And remember, when we talk about the success of PC, streamers are also a reason for the success of PC, because people started to watch streamers, and usually streamers would stream on PC, which maybe encourage players to then just, okay, I'm going to also play on PC because my favorite streamer is playing on PC. Apex also launched at the right timing. It was launched as Fortnite and PUBG were cooling off a little bit after 1 year or so launch. And it was before Warzone, Call of Duty Warzone. So Apex became the fresh, cool alternative for also older teens and adults. And finally, a few examples of the local engagement and what EA did and invested in Japan-specific marketing, localized events and content. So you have these massive billboards, like digital billboard in the cities. You had in the subway with collaboration with manga writers. You also had the Global Service Championship in Sapporo that happened this year in January, February. And then the most impressive for me is the fact that there was a temporary exhibit of Apex Legends in Tokyo last year, which is, I mean, you never see that almost in Japan. So it was made a cultural event, really product in Japan. And that's all I had today. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I am. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Manu. That was really, really interesting, and despite lots of information to take in, but also really, really clear and succinct. You can tell you've been doing this for quite some time.
Yeah.
So I think as I was I didn't want to interrupt at the time, but
yeah.
Obviously, earlier on, you were talking about the sudden brief boom in PC gaming. What would you say? Do you have an idea what fueled that? Was there something that happened, a release in particular, or was it I guess a confluence of events?
Yeah, you really see that the law about esports really changed the game on PC, because usually esport is more popular on PC anyway. So it really boosted PC, the ability to compete for real money, probably, like there is really a prize to win compared to before. Before it was assimilated to gambling, and then it became just like almost normal wage to make a profit out of esport competition. So it also created more events, and all of that increased the engagement, the viewership, and people want to play when they see that. So it just I think it made video games even more popular, and also on PC, which was not that much the case before. So there was that, and then it's like a double effect, the COVID. Everybody started playing a little bit more on PC during COVID. We saw that, and yeah, I don't think it's really specific to a title, to be fair. Maybe also with the audience aging, there is on average, the audience is a bit older on PC. So also it followed the demographics somehow. And yeah, all in all, it was a combination of elements, but when you look at the number, it's massive. And it was not really detrimental to console, because console also continued to grow at the same time. It really felt like that new or more players jumped in, and they jumped in on PC.
That's really, really good to hear. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate all of your time today. We've answered a couple of questions in the chat. So Dylan and Manu here, and Meha and Meg, thank you so much for your time this morning, or this evening if you're Dylan. Yeah, we do have that hard stop, so we should close it off here.